orphaned gorilla refuses food for weeks, the heartbreaking reason will shatter you. The air in the sanctuary enclosure hangs thick and suffocating, carrying the heavy, humid promise of rain that refuses to break. It presses against the skin, a stifling blanket of moisture that smells of crushed ferns, damp earth, and the sharp, metallic tang of atmospheric pressure building to a breaking point. In the dim, slate-gray light of the approaching equatorial storm, a solitary figure sits huddled in the furthest corner of the straw-lined habitat. This is Ndidi, a 4-year-old orphaned mountain gorilla, and he is slowly, deliberately slipping away. Around his motionless form lies a heartbreaking mosaic of untouched offerings. Plump, sunset-colored papayas, rich green celery stalks, and bowls of warm, sweet-smelling milk have been left to rot. Their decaying, fermenting sweetness mingles with the earthy musk of the enclosure, creating a cloying aroma of biological defeat. For 21 agonizing days, Ndidi has refused every morsel. This is a profound, terrifying defiance of the most fundamental imperative in the natural world, the desperate will to survive. In the wild, an orphaned primate his age would scavenge relentlessly, driven by an agonizing primal hunger that eclipses all other instincts. Yet, Ndidi simply sits. His obsidian eyes, once bright with mischievous intelligence, are now hollow, fixed on a seemingly empty, dark patch of the rough concrete floor. He does not cry out in hunger. He does not rock in distress. He simply waits in the suffocating heat, his majestic spirit extinguishing itself breath by fragile breath, locked in a mystery that the world's leading experts cannot unravel. Before we journey deeper into the haunting shadows of Ndidi's starvation and uncover the shattering truth behind his silent vigil, please take a moment to join our community. If stories of the profound, unspoken connections between humans and the natural world resonate with your soul, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We are building a global sanctuary for those who understand the language of the heart. Leave a comment below right now telling us where in the world you are watching from and what time it is there. Let's see how far the echo of Ndidi's story can reach and how many hearts are beating alongside his. To understand the agonizing depth of this current crisis, one must first be enveloped in the profound sanctuary of trust that existed before the darkness fell. The Virunga Mountains Rescue Center is a place defined by its sensory richness, a haven carved out of the raw wilderness. Here, the dawn breaks with the soft, golden, forgiving light of the African sun, casting long, warm shadows across the mist-shrouded volcanic peaks. The air always carries the green, vibrant scent of flowering lobelias and the comforting, dusty, sun-baked aroma of primate fur. It was into this sensory haven that Ndidi was brought 2 years ago, a terrified, shivering infant smelling of dried blood, gun smoke, and profound trauma after poachers claimed his mother's life. His rehabilitation was painstakingly guided by a senior caregiver named Thomas, a man whose quiet presence was as steady as the ancient trees. The bond between them was not merely professional, it was a delicate, intricate tapestry woven from shared moments of absolute vulnerability. Thomas would sit for hours in the dappled afternoon light, the rough, calloused texture of his human hands gently grooming Ndidi's thick, coarse back hair. They communicated entirely in the unspoken frequencies of deep, resonant sighs, subtle shifts in gaze, and the synchronized cadence of their resting heartbeats. Ndidi learned to associate the rough cotton of Thomas's faded green uniform with the sweet, milky, powdery scent of formula, the absolute safety of a warm embrace against the biting mountain drafts, and the unwavering certainty of tomorrow. When Thomas laughed, a low, rumbling vibration echoed deep in his chest, and Ndidi would respond with a soft, breathy chuckle. His leathery, surprisingly delicate fingers curled tightly into the fabric of Thomas's shirt. It was a relationship built on the absolute, foundational premise of mutual presence, an unspoken vow that they would never face the terrors of the world alone again. But that beautiful foundation was abruptly, violently shattered, leading to a deterioration that began as a silent, creeping shadow. It initially masked itself as a mere loss of appetite, a temporary malaise. When Ndidi first turned his head away from a ripe, fragrant cluster of sweet bananas, the sanctuary staff attributed it to a passing digestive upset, perhaps a reaction to a change in the humidity. Yet, as the days bled into weeks, the clinical reality became undeniably grim and terrifyingly urgent. Ndidi's vibrant, sunset-colored fur began to lose its natural oils and luster, turning dull, brittle, and feeling like dry, withered grass to the desperate touch of the veterinarians. The sanctuary clinic, normally a place infused with the hopeful energy of healing, became suffocated by the acidic scent of pain, the sour musk of a dying animal, and the sharp, unforgiving, sterile bite of chemical disinfectants. Veterinary experts from across the globe were consulted via crackling satellite phones, their voices tight with anxiety. They ran exhaustive panels of blood tests, administered subcutaneous fluids beneath Ndidi's increasingly loose, graying skin, and offered every conceivable primate delicacy, from the soft, watery pith of wild ginger to the sticky, irresistible nectar of passion fruit. Nothing worked. Dr. Aris, the lead veterinarian, watched with growing devastation, the harsh, unforgiving fluorescent lights of the exam room highlighting the deep, exhausted lines of failure etched into her face. Ndidi's clinical signs were catastrophic and paradoxical profound lethargy, a dangerously low core temperature that left him shivering violently despite the oppressive, stagnant heat of the afternoons, and eyes that had sunken so deep into his skull they looked like empty caverns. The medical consensus was a chilling admission of defeat. Physically, Ndidi's organs were capable of functioning, but his mind had shut them down. He was suffering from an acute, systemic failure of the will to live. He was actively choosing to starve, slipping into the cold embrace of the void. The breakthrough did not come from a microscope, a complex blood panel, or a dusty textbook on primate physiology. It came on a night when the weather mirrored the violent, internal devastation of the sanctuary. A torrential downpour lashed against the tin roof of Ndidi's enclosure, the deafening, percussive roar of the rain drowning out the nocturnal chorus of the jungle. The air grew uncomfortably cold, smelling of crushed, wet stones and the raw, electric violence of the storm. Dr. Aris, refusing to leave the dying gorilla's side, sat huddled under a damp wool blanket, watching him through the reinforced, rain-streaked glass. It was then, in the sudden, blinding flash of a jagged stroke of lightning, that illuminated the stark, skeletal shadows of the room, that she noticed a shattering detail. Ndidi was not staring blankly at an empty patch of concrete. He was staring at a faint, dark stain on the floor, a specific spot where an invisible, pungent scent lingered, trapped in the porous stone. The truth hit Dr. Aris with the blunt, breathless force of a physical blow to the chest. 3 weeks ago, on the exact day Ndidi stopped eating, his primary caregiver, Thomas, had suffered a massive, near-fatal heart attack right there in the enclosure. Thomas had collapsed to the concrete, his chest heaving, his skin suddenly cold and clammy, radiating the acidic scent of pain, sudden panic, and sheer biological terror. Ndidi had been beside him, frantically touching Thomas's face, absorbing the chaotic, fading rhythm of the man's failing heart. When the medical evacuation team rushed in, their boots loud on the floor, they carried the distinct, terrifying smells of synthetic adrenaline, metallic fear, and sterile plastic stretchers. In their desperate bid to save Thomas's life, they had aggressively, violently pushed the screaming Ndidi away. Ndidi didn't know Thomas had survived and was recovering in a human hospital miles away, tethered to machines. To Ndidi, the sudden absence, the lingering scent of agonizing pain baked into the concrete, and the violent separation meant only one thing. He had lost his mother to the violence of the forest, and now he had lost his father to the violence of the sanctuary floor. The heartbreaking reason for his starvation wasn't a virus or a failing organ. It was a debilitating, all-consuming grief. He was holding a permanent vigil at the exact coordinates of what he believed was his surrogate father's death. He refused food because eating, moving, or living required leaving that sacred spot. He was choosing to die where he thought Thomas had died, bound by an loyalty and a love so profound it completely overrode his own biological urge to survive. The realization dictated that the healing could not be administered through a cold IV drip or a syringe. It had to be a literal resurrection of the heart. 2 days later, against the strict, frantic advice of his own cardiologists, a frail, pale, and deeply exhausted Thomas returned to the sanctuary. The air in the enclosure was still heavy with the sickly, sweet scent of untouched decay when the heavy metal door squealed open on its rusted hinges. The late afternoon light filtered softly through the canopy, casting a warm, fragile amber glow across the dusty straw. Thomas, leaning heavily on an aluminum cane, his breathing shallow and labored, stepped into the space. He smelled distinctly different now, laced with the sharp, chemical odor of hospital antibacterial soap and the faint, powdery scent of heavy heart medication. But beneath those alien layers was the familiar, earthy, deep-rooted essence of the man who had taught Ndidi to trust the world. Ndidi, lying flat on his side, his ribcage barely rising, did not move at first. Then the scent reached him. A low, weak, vibrating whimper escaped his parched, cracked lips. Thomas slowly, agonizingly lowered himself to the cold concrete, discarding his cane, and crawled on his hands and knees to the spot where Ndidi lay waiting to die. He didn't offer a banana. He didn't offer milk. He simply laid his chest against Ndidi's hollow, fragile, protruding spine. He wrapped his arms, trembling with physical weakness and overwhelming emotion, around the young gorilla's frail frame. For a long, breathless eternity, the only sound in the enclosure was the soft rustle of dry straw and the patter of residual rain. Then the miracle began. Ndidi's shallow, rapid, panicked breaths began to slow, catching and matching the rhythm of Thomas's own scarred, medically fragile, but steady heartbeat. It was the beautiful, undeniable, synchronized breathing of two survivors finding each other in the dark. The rigid, frozen tension in Ndidi's limbs suddenly melted away, his muscles releasing a palpable, physical wave of exhaustion. He finally turned his massive, heavy head, burying his face deep in the crook of Thomas's neck, inhaling deeply, desperately breathing in the scent of life. Only then, with hot tears tracking through the dust on both their faces, did Thomas reach into his pocket with a trembling hand to offer a small, perfectly ripe piece of papaya. Undidi, his eyes never leaving Thomas's tear-streaked face, opened his mouth, felt the soft, yielding texture of the fruit, and took his first life-saving bite in nearly a month. This shattering ordeal stands as a monumental, undeniable testament to the sheer, fathomless depth of animal emotion, leaving us with a philosophical legacy that challenges the very boundaries of human exceptionalism. We as a species so often arrogantly relegate the animal kingdom to the cold realm of pure instinct, assuming they are driven purely by the mechanical, unfeeling pursuit of calories, reproduction, and basic survival. Yet, Ndidi's silent, willing starvation reveals a truth that is both exquisitely beautiful and deeply terrifying. Love, in its purest, most devastating, and sacrificial form, is not a uniquely human experience. It is a universal language, a vibrant sixth sense woven intricately into the very fabric of consciousness across species lines. The capacity for profound empathy, the crippling, physical grief of anticipated loss, and the willing readiness to sacrifice one's own physical existence to honor the memory of a bond, these are not mere anthropomorphic projections constructed by sentimental humans. They are undeniable, biological realities observed in the fading pulse and the eventual, tearful resurrection of an orphaned primate. Ndidi teaches us that the mind of a gorilla is not merely a lesser, simplified version of our own, but a vast emotional landscape of equal, if not greater, intensity and purity. His story demands that we look at the natural world not as a collection of resources or biological automatons moving through a blind existence, but as a community of deeply sentient beings capable of breaking their own hearts over the fear of losing us. As we leave Ndidi and Thomas to their quiet, continued recovery, breathing in the fresh scent of rain-washed earth and the sweet, tangible promise of a new morning, we are powerfully reminded that every creature on this earth carries a vast universe of feeling within them. Thank you for joining us on this deeply emotional, transformative journey into the language of the heart. If this story moved your soul, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and share this video with someone who desperately needs to be reminded of the healing power of unbroken bonds. We want to hear from you now. Have you ever experienced a moment where an animal demonstrated an intuition, a loyalty, or an emotional depth that completely shattered your expectations and changed how you view the world? Share your stories with us in the comments below, and until next time, keep listening closely to the unspoken voices of the wild.